Iranian President Ahmadinejad meets with Egypt's most prominent Muslim cleric on his three-day visit to the country. Opening amid controversy, Japan establishes a new office to handle the country's territorial disputes with its neighbors. Want not, waste not. China launches a national campaign to cut government extravagance and public food waste. And continuing with our special series on climate change, now a world of ice. Could Greenland one day be a world underwater? Hello and welcome from Beijing. You are watching NewsHour on CCTV News. I'm Wang Mengmeng. We begin in Egypt. Iranian President Mohammed Ahmadinejad has been received by Egypt's most prominent Muslim cleric, Ahmad al-Tayyib. The meeting took place in Cairo at Al-Azhar, the Sunni Muslim world's foremost Islamist institution. Ahmadinejad is on a three-day visit to the country. It's the first trip by an Iranian leader to Egypt since the late 1970s. Al-Tayyib said Egypt would stand with Iran, but warned the Iranian leader against interference in the region or the spread of Shiite influence. The cleric particularly warned mainly Shiite Iran against interference in Bahrain. Ahmadinejad told journalists that Iran is very close in opinions and point of views with Al-Azhar when it comes to regional interests. Ahmadinejad's visit is the latest sign of efforts by Egypt's Islamist President Mohamed Morsi to improve relations. For more on the significance of Ahmadinejad's visit, our correspondent in Cairo, Auda Al-Mahroui, has this report.
His trip is seen as a potential to restore relations between both countries. The world is watching closely President Ahmadinejad's visit to Cairo.
Iran is very keen to develop relations with Egypt, particularly after the revolution, with the rise of the Muslim Brothers to power, etc. So they entertained the idea of developing relations with Egypt, even developing this relation to the level of some sort of like a strong working relationship, maybe some sort of alliance. They realize that there is a lot of difficulties facing this goal. However, they are not giving up.
So far, Egypt's relation with Iran is kept at the same low level as when Mubarak was president. But since Morsi came to power, Egypt has been giving mixed signals to the world regarding Iran. After a complete blackout, it is now leaving a narrow window of opportunity to improve relations.
I believe the new Egyptian leadership is using Iran as a kind of a bargaining chip at this moment in its relation with the United States, in its relation with Israel, in its relations with the Gulf countries. So keep Iran as a kind of a card that you could use if you are forced to do that, and keep it as a kind of a way to pressure those kind of hard allies.
Ahmadinejad's visit comes under the umbrella of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation Summit, which Egypt is hosting. He also expressed his desire to visit Tahrir Square, the core of change in Egypt that might be the reason to restore relations between both countries. This is the second opportunity in 6 months that both Ahmadinejad and Morsi meet. But while it seems that potential exists to restore relations, Egypt is still hesitant. It fears that such step might freeze billions of dollars of aid promised from the West. So currently, it is satisfied to turn Iran from a liability to an asset. Adel Mahroui, CCTV, Cairo.
Ado Al-Mahroui now joins us from Cairo for the latest on the visit by Iranian President Ahmadinejad. Well, Ado, we understand that President Ahmadinejad has met with Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi, and he's also been received by the prominent Muslim cleric Ahmad al-Tayyib. So tell us more about Ahmadinejad's schedule in Egypt over the 3 days.
Well, the first schedule of the day is, of course, outside the umbrella of the OIC. For the rest of the visit, it is mainly all talks regarding the OIC's meeting in Egypt today. The summit will begin in a few hours, and then what will happen is a series of side talks. Of course, Syria will take a very strong part of the agenda. The Palestinian crisis and the Israeli settlements are on top of the agenda of all the talks between the leaders. This will be part of 26 out of 57 leaders of the OIC who will start their summit today, and tomorrow they should all together announce the points of agreement on such crises all over the world between the Islamic countries.
And Ado, Ahmadinejad is the first Iranian president to visit Egypt in 3 decades. How significant is it? And how is this visit being covered by local media?
Well, it is the biggest news. I mean, it is taking much bigger attention from the local media and from Egyptians in general, more than the OIC meeting itself. The OIC in general is regarding as a regular meeting like the United Nations or the Arab League, and there is no big expectations on the resolutions of the meeting. Yet Ahmadinejad's visit to Egypt is the biggest of all, because there has been talks since President Morsi came to power that the two countries might return to normal, strong relations as before the Iranian revolution. And of course, Egypt and Iran are two of the most significant political players in the Middle East, and therefore returning of relations could change the balance of powers in the Middle East.
Well, thanks very much, Ado, for your report from Cairo. Appreciate it. Egypt was once closely allied to Iran's deposed Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, but diplomatic relations were severed after Iran's 1979 Islamic Revolution. After the Islamic Revolution, Egypt signed a peace treaty with Israel and offered asylum to the Shah. In 1980, relations were totally cut off, with only interest sections remaining in each other's capital to help deal with diplomatic affairs. Reprimands started after the 2011 unrest that toppled Egypt's former leader Hosni Mubarak. Iran persisted with further steps. In August 2012, Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi attended the Non-Aligned Movement Summit in Tehran. He became the first head of Egypt to visit Iran in 3 decades. To talk more about this, we're joined online by our correspondent Wang Jinyan from Tehran. Thanks very much for joining us on NewsHour, Jinyan. We understand, well, as our correspondent in Cairo, Ado just mentioned, that the visit by Ahmadinejad is actually drawing more media attention than the IOC meeting itself. So tell us more about how this is being covered by media in Iran.
Yes, this Iranian President Ahmadinejad trip to Cairo is here by some analysts seen as a sign that the frigid ties between these two countries have getting warmer. And just before departure to Cairo, the Iranian President Ahmadinejad have said that the political geography of the region will change if the two countries expanding its ties. And these words have quoted by many media here as its headlines. So, but despite these warmer signs between these two countries, the analysts here believe that the full doubts that these warmer signs will result in the full restoration of the diplomatic ties between these two countries. One of the Iran's popular daily, the Sharq newspaper, comments that there are many important issues have been the obstacles and shadowed the trip of Ahmadinejad to Cairo. One of the main issues is the Syria crisis, and the author comments that because Iran is the closest ally of the Syria government, but Egypt is among those countries to call for Assad to step down. And the other issues become the problem between these two countries is the Cairo's links with the Gulf states, and also its relationship between U.S. and Israel. So the author think that in current stages it's still not practical yet that for Iran and Egypt to full restoration of its relationship in current conditions.
Well, Jinyan, many analysts say that this is one of the steps to try to restore diplomatic relations between the two regional powers. However, they remain deeply divided on a couple of issues. So what drives Iran to improve ties with Egypt?
Yes, we're seeing that in these days that Iran is quite active in its diplomatic move to try to restore this relationship between Iran and Egypt. And just yesterday, Iran's Foreign Minister Ali Akbar Salehi has said that Egypt is a very important country in the region, and Iran expected to restore the political ties with this country. And so we can see just behind this move, the analysts believe there are many main reasons. One of the important reasons is that Iran tried to prove that all those efforts try to besiege Iran in the region, and also the sanctions tried to imposing on Iran have been failed, and with these expanding ties with Egypt. And this is very important before that Iran is going to start another negotiation talks with the P5+1 countries. And the other regions is that to try to expanding ties with Egypt and can open a Gulf, can open an Arab gate to those Gulf countries, especially will give Iran a greater margin to negotiate with these Gulf countries in many important issues, including the Syria crisis and also the Persian Gulf issues. Back to you, Mama.
Well, thank you so much, Xinyan, for your report from Tehran. Appreciate it. Well, no doubt the meeting between Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi is a historic step in the two countries' relations. And for more analysis, we're joined in the studio by Mr. Li Guofu, the director of the Middle East Studies Center at the China Institute of International Studies. It's good to have you on NewsHour, Mr. Li. Ahmadinejad is the first head of state of Iran to visit Egypt in more than 3 decades, paving the ground perhaps to restore diplomatic ties between the two countries. How significant is this?
I think the visit is very, very significant, despite, this time Ahmadinejad, the Iranian president, went to Egypt. It's not only related to the bilateral relations, it is multilateral relations. He went to Egypt to attend the summit of the OIC. And just like Egyptian President Morsi did last August, he went to Tehran just to attend the summit of the non-aligned movements. But despite these multilateral events, the visit itself, it is very significant with regard to the bilateral relations between Iran and Egypt. As you have said that, this visit, it is the first time in 3 decades. And it is signaling the shifting dynamics in the regions. People would never imagine, if there's no Arab Spring, if there's no ouster of the Egyptian former president Hosni Mubarak, this kind of visit could be possible occurred. So I think that the first significance, it indicated the shifting, the change in the regions. Certainly, I think that the from Iranian side would like to take these opportunities, try to strengthen its relations with the most important country in the Arab world, and also try very hard, to break down the efforts imposed by the West countries, try to isolate, the Iranians, especially we talk about the Iranian nuclear issue is concerned. I think for the President Morsi is also very important of this visit because he wants to show to the world he will adopted a very independent foreign policy and once again reasserted Egypt as a regional powers. So I think, despite the fact, the visit itself is very, very important for the two countries.
As I mentioned, this is, of course, a very important diplomatic effort between the two regional powers. However, we understand that they, too, are still deeply divided over many issues. For example, the situation in Syria and the situation in Palestine and Israel. So what can we expect from this meeting?
I think despite the coverage or despite the commentaries from the world media, myself, I don't expect very much from the visit itself. I don't believe it will come out with any substantive, the results from the visit itself, but certainly the visit would strengthen the bilateral relations between the two countries. As we know that Iran and Egypt both are the most important regional countries. Any improvement between the two countries not affected the relation between the two countries, but also affected the other sides, as you say, the other issues, regional countries. For example, for Egypt, what they calculated, the benefits and the costs, would think any steps would taken to improve its relations with Iran. Would think about the reaction from the Gulf states as well as from the U.S. So I believe that despite the efforts or the running very much to improve the relations, but the Egypt may have some hesitations about further, especially to restore the diplomatic relations between the two countries.
Well, at least this is a start. Thanks very much, Mr. Li, for sharing your view with us on that. That was Mr. Li Guofu joining us from the China Institute of International Studies. This is NewsHour on CCTV News. Coming up next. Opening amid controversy, Japan establishes a new office to handle the country's territorial disputes with its neighbors. And a show of force. The U.S.-South Korea naval drill in waters off the Korean peninsula reaches its last day. It's now 20 minutes past the hour. Welcome back to NewsHour. Japan's State Minister for Okinawa and Northern Territories Affairs, Ichita Yamamoto, has announced that the government has established a new office to handle the country's territorial disputes with China, South Korea, and Russia. Speaking at a press conference, Yamamoto said the new office will help Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and other officials explain Japan's stance on the disputed territories to the international community. Comprised of 15 staff, the new organ will coordinate within the government and map out effective public relations strategies for territorial issues. Besides its territorial dispute with China, Japan is also engaged in a disagreement with South Korea. Japan took over the Dokdo Islands in 1905, which are called the Takashima Islands in Japan. South Korea reclaimed the islands in the early 1950s and deployed police there. Now, the dispute escalated in August 2012 as South Korea's then-President Lee Myung-bak made an unprecedented visit to the islands. Meanwhile, another dispute also exists over the Russian-controlled Kuril Islands, with Japan claiming sovereignty over 4 of the islands known as its northern territories. The dispute has kept Japan and Russia from signing a formal treaty ending their World War II hostilities. China has reaffirmed its right to surveillance patrols near its Diaoyu Islands. This comes after recent Japanese protests. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Hua Chunying expressed China's position on this issue.
Diaoyu Island and its affiliated islets has been China's inherent territory since ancient times. China has adequate historical and legal basis on that. And it is a normal activity for China's ships to patrol and enforce the law in waters near the Diaoyu Islands.
Hua Chunying also says China's position is clear on using diplomacy and negotiation to resolve disputes with neighboring countries. The priority is for Japan to stop sending its ships and planes to waters near the Diaoyu Islands. And she says Japan should face history and reality and engage in talks with China to find an effective and proper solution. Now, for more analysis on Japan's new office on disputed territories, we're now joined in the studio by Ms. Su Xiaohui from the China Institute of International Studies. It's nice to have you on NewsHour, Xiaohui. Well, in your opinion, why Japanese government made the decision to set up a new office to explain its territorial stance to the international community? Is it too busy with territorial rows with its neighbors?
Well, Japan is trying to strengthen the publicity concerning the territorial disputes. The country is worried that it is in a disadvantageous position in the public opinion. We knew that last year, the then Foreign Minister Jemba paid visits to a series of European countries and tried to seek support from the related countries, but he failed to gain any concrete support from all these countries. And at the same time, Japan noticed that other countries, including China, are trying to strengthen our publicity. And we know that last year, China carried out a serious actions to claim our sovereignty concerning the Diaoyu Islands. And our ambassador to UK wrote an essay for the Financial Times concerning the territorial disputes with Japan. So Japan is trying to move forward for its own publicity. But I'm afraid that Japan's actions will not change the history and will not change the sovereignty of these disputed islands and territories. So it is the right time for Japan to return to the track to talk with related countries to solve this issue.
Well, on the one hand, we are seeing Japan's government establishing this new office to explain its territorial stance to the international community. On the other hand, Japan is sending special envoys to its neighboring countries to try to mend ties. Does it seem contradictory?
Well, you are right. It seems contradictory, but fundamentally speaking, I'm afraid that Japan has not changed its policies. From political perspective, we are clear that Japan is turning more conservative. It will try to amend its pacifist constitution. And this country is trying to strengthen the related functions concerning the territorial disputes inside the country. And from the security perspective, we knew that recently Japan decided to set a special force to improve its surveillance concerning the disputed waters. And from foreign policy, it is obvious that this country is strengthening its relationship with the U.S. and trying to gain more support from its ally. So we don't see any sincerity in Japan's move towards related countries to talk about these disputes. That is the problem for Japan and also for its neighbors. So we all hope that Japan can return to the right track and talk with us and try to solve the problem in the best way that for maintaining the regional stability.
Well, thank you so much, Xiaohui, for sharing your will with us. That was Ms. Su Xiaohui speaking to us from the China Institute of International Studies. Now we turn to the Korean Peninsula. It's the last day of a 3-day U.S.-South Korea naval exercise in waters of the east coast of the Korean Peninsula. The exercise is considered as a show of force as speculation abounds over a potential nuclear test by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Now, according to South Korea's Yonhap news agency, the joint maneuver involves an American nuclear submarine and Aegis-guided missile cruiser. 10 South Korean warships are also participating, as well as anti-submarine and maritime surveillance aircraft and maritime helicopters. The DPRK state media has denounced the exercise, saying that the U.S. and South Korea have been plotting to attack the DPRK and are increasing the danger of a war on the peninsula. Well, this is News Hour on CCTV News. More stories ahead when we come back. Buying time, U.S. President Obama urges lawmakers to approve short-term spending cuts and tax reforms to delay automatic damaging cuts. And the Bank of Japan's governor announces plans to resign in March, earlier than the official end of his term. Stay with us. Welcome back to News Hour. It's now time to hand over to my colleague Lei for all the latest business news from around Asia. Well, Lei, President Barack Obama is trying to delay some automatic spending cuts. How economically damaging is that?
It's very economically damaging, Mang. Now, U.S. President Barack Obama has urged lawmakers to agree to a small package of spending cuts and tax reforms that is aimed to delay the larger automatic cuts from going into effect and damaging the U.S. economic growth.
Congress is already working towards a budget that would permanently replace the sequester. At the very least, we should give them the chance to come up with this budget instead of making indiscriminate cuts now that will cost us jobs and significantly slow down our recovery.
Huge cuts to defense and domestic programs are slated to go into effect in roughly 3 weeks, a threat that has caused uncertainty and could hurt economic growth. If launched as scheduled, the cuts would reduce federal spending across the board by about $85 billion for 1 year, split evenly between military and domestic programs. The total reduction through 2022 would be about $1.2 trillion. Obama says he still believes a broad, balanced plan to achieve $4 trillion in deficit deficit reduction is possible. However, his proposal has been quickly rebuffed by Republican leaders. Now let's move on to the stock markets and talk about the Chinese stock market, which has closed for about an hour now, and we are counting down 28 minutes till the start of afternoon trade. The market did ease just a whisker after 7 days of gains. We saw very narrow trading this morning. The Shanghai Composite ended at 2,431. Brokers posted very strong gains, but they were offset by losses in energy and property stocks. So we're seeing a lot of rotational buying in the last few sessions coming up to Chinese New Year. Shares in Ping An, which is China's second largest life insurer, surged 4.1% on reports that its $9 billion stake sale to Thailand's CP Group has already gone through. Another sell-off for liquor maker stocks, the likes of Wu Liangye, as China seeks to change that boozy business banquet culture. We have media reports today that Zhou Shaoqiang, who is chief executive at Gree Group in the city of Zhuhai, and that company actually controls the listed appliance maker Gree. Now, Zhou, according to reports, has been suspended for a lavish $6,000 dinner during which 12 bottles of expensive wine were consumed. No wonder those liquor maker shares were hit. Gree shares were down 1.6%. Moving to Japan, where the stock market is on a tear. On this piece of news, Bank of Japan Governor Masaki Shirakawa says he will step down on March 19th, 3 weeks earlier than the official end of his 5-year term. Shirakawa's term is due to end on April 8th, but his two deputies' 5-year terms end on March the 19th. That means he would have otherwise had to stay on for 3 weeks after 2 new deputies joined the 9-member board. Shirakawa's early exit may mean the new governor will take over earlier than expected and may affect the timing of Prime Minister Abe's selection of a replacement. After Abe's Liberal Democratic Party returned to power in December, Shirakawa has been under pressure to pursue increasingly aggressive monetary easing, but Abe has stressed he's still respecting the bank's independence. Take a listen.
The Bank of Japan set a 2% inflation target itself independently and is taking on the responsibility of implementing this as soon as possible. I deeply support the independence of monetary policy, and on that basis, I can say we have no plans to alter the independence of the Bank of Japan.
The market liking the BOJ governor news. As I mentioned, the Nikkei is on fire today. It did open up by about 1.7% and now gains stand at over 3%. And now we're going to speak to Yonggi Kang, who is joining us live in Tokyo with the latest. Hi there, Yonggi. The market obviously liking the fact that a new BOJ governor will come in earlier.
Indeed, Lei, the market is on fire here in Tokyo. The Nikkei currently up about 350 points, a big rally there. And the biggest factor behind today's rally is, in fact, as we mentioned, BOJ Governor Shirakawa's decision to step down next month. Now, as you said, his term expires on April 8th, but instead he said he's leaving on March 19th. No, that's only 3 weeks earlier than expected, but market reaction shows that investors clearly want a central bank governor who can pursue aggressive monetary easing and achieve that 2% inflation target. Now, the forex market also reacting strongly to Shirakawa's early departure. The yen is falling sharply against both the dollar and the euro. It's hitting its lowest levels in more than 2 years. The euro is trading in the mid-127 yen level, and that is the highest since April 2010. Now, we are seeing broad buying of shares, just to name a few. Exporters, Sony is up 2%, Komatsu is up 3.2%. And it wasn't just exporters. Financial shares also benefiting from Shirakawa's early departure. Mitsubishi UFJ Financial Group, that is up 2.7%, and Nomura Holdings up 1.4%, so broad buying here in Tokyo today. Now, in terms of earnings, so far, the announcements have been relatively weak. 63% of 99 Nikkei companies that have reported so far are actually missing analyst estimates. But we're hearing from analysts that the market is looking beyond those headline numbers and are focusing more on the prospects of better business conditions with the weaker yen.
So pretty broad-based gains, Yonggi, but let's look at the auto space because Toyota came out with profit numbers after the bell. Right. What's been the share reaction like?
Well, Leia, in fact, the stock market is reacting positively to Tuesday's earnings announcement. Toyota is posting huge gains there. Investors are pleased to see Toyota raise its annual profit forecast by more than 10% to 860 billion yen, which is about $9.3 billion. Analysts are saying that the benefit of a weaker yen is bigger than what many had expected, and that is spurring this optimism. Now, we have to see how a stronger yen is going to impact other exporters today. Just to give you some names, Mazda and Nikon, these two exporters, will be giving out their numbers, so we have to look and see how they are going to perform.
Thank you so much, Yong-Hee Kang. A huge pop for the Nikkei today on that BOJ Governor News. Yong-Hee Kang joining us live from Tokyo. Now, moving on to the regional markets, let's show you some market indices from around the region. Now, let's take a look at broader Asian equities and speak to Gautam Srinivasan, who is joining us from Singapore. Hi there, Gautam. So we got a rebound on Wall Street overnight, giving a positive lead to Asian stocks. Give us the roundup.
Well, the risk appetite seems to be returning, especially since markets are realizing that they overreacted to those Eurozone growth concerns yesterday. And that's according to some investors, especially since, as you mentioned, data came out showing growth in business activity in the Eurozone, and BQs from US overnight were positive in terms of good earnings and also data showing expansion in the services sector. For markets like Hong Kong, there was also the added cue of strength in the Chinese banking sector, which helped the Hang Seng recover from its one-month closing low in the previous session. Bank of Communications and Hang Seng Bank both up more than 1%. The China Enterprises Index was up around 0.6%, and in the meanwhile, so was the Taiwanese market. And our trade there has been a bit cautious, though, with banks being in focus as the central bank there allows the islands banks to conduct business in the Chinese yuan from today, and that's for Taiwan. The banking and insurance index there was up 1.6%. South Korea, meanwhile, is flat at 1939. That currency tug of war between the weaker yen and the stronger won hurting exporters like Hyundai, Kia and Samsung Heavy Industries, though telecom and pharma shares seem to be supporting the index.
Gautam, the Aussie markets are doing well. They're up for the 12th time in 15 sessions. How long before the ASX 200 breaks that 5,000 mark?
Well, if it was just simple math, then based on today's performance, the ASX 200, which is just 80 points off 5,000, might hit that mark by Friday. But that's mere conjecture, since investors feel that if the ASX 200 has to break that 49.50 barrier first, company fundamentals need to continue to outperform and macro issues need to be subdued. The retail data there was released earlier today, and the numbers don't look good, which could fuel talks of a rate cut since the RBA held rates yesterday. Now, broadly, the gains in Australian equities have been led by financials, again on good global cues. Westpac Banking and Commonwealth Bank of Australia are up 0.8%. ANZ is up 1.3%. Miners like BHP Billiton and Rio Tinto are also up as an after effect of the recent rally in iron ore prices. Overall, steady Wednesday for Asia after a traumatic Tuesday, with investors hoping to see out a good day today. Back to you.
Steady is good. Thank you so much. That was Gautam Srinivasan joining us live from Singapore. So that does it for the market report. Back to you, Mama.
Thanks very much, Chen Lei. Well, now let's move on to some domestic news in China of food waste. China has taken on a national campaign to cut government spending on receptions and reduce food waste by the public. Restaurants have also joined the fight by introducing saving measures, and this could signal a huge shift in a country where the traditional idea of hospitality is growing board. CCTV reporter Han Bin checks out the campaign against extravagance at some of Beijing's restaurants.
Chinese love to eat. Food is regarded as the most important way to communicate. And many believe when it comes to hospitality, the more the better, to the point of excess. Zhong Shushu is torn between common sense and tradition.
I think we need to order something we like to eat and easy to finish, and maybe a half order to avoid waste.
In the end, Zhong Shushu orders 5 dishes, half a Peking duck, some vegetables, and a spicy fish. She believes that saving food doesn't mean just cutting back or being cheap, but finishing whatever they order. The manager of this restaurant is doing what he can to help diners. It pains him to see untouched food thrown out.
For example, if customers order more than they can eat, our waiters should kindly remind them to cut the numbers of dishes to reduce waste.
Some people are in the habit of finishing everything on their daily lunch tray. Xu Zhijun has been doing it for years. He calls it clearing the plate. The day we interviewed him, he cleared his plates within 20 minutes.
There are still a lot of people who don't have enough to eat, yet many local citizens have thrown away a whole chicken or fish. What people find even more unbearable are the government reception dinners, wasting huge amounts of public money.
For over
campaign not only targets the consumer's end, but also it's a dilemma for China's catering and hospitality industry, especially with the Chinese New Year approaching. Now, it's the peak season for dinners and banquets at this time of the year. How can they balance being profitable and being economical?
Well, certain segments of the business will surely be affected. For example, the price of a Maltai, the most expensive liquor in China, has dropped significantly in recent months.
And this is unprecedented price drop.
Yes, yes. It's bad for one business, for one company, but it's not bad for the whole country. Consuming a dozen bottles of Maltai or imported wine in that case is not going to help the economy because it is not regular consumers' money they are spending. It is taxpayers' money, which could have been much better spent elsewhere. As I see it, the new campaign will not affect most of the catering business, except the high end. For these businesses, I think they will have to adjust by finding real customers who pay out of their own pockets. So the assumption that finishing up the plate and curbing corruption is bad for China's economy, I don't really believe it at all. It is just a rationale to justify something unsavory in the first place. A sound economy is sustained by sensible consumption, not massive waste. Back to you.
Thanks so much, Mr. Zhou. Of course, it's not just about finishing what you eat, but also a change of mindset. Appreciate it. That's Raymond Zhou joining us from the China Daily newspaper. All right, now it's time to hand over to my colleague David for all the latest sports news from around the world. David.
Mama, thank you. Let me tell you, the Matador is back. After an 8-month absence, Spanish tennis superstar Rafael Nadal has finally returned to a tennis court. The 26-year-old won a doubles match at the Chilean Open and will play in his first singles on Wednesday. The former world #1 and Argentine partner Juan Monaco overpowered Czech duo František Semak and Lucas Dorhi in 65 minutes at the Pacific coastal city of Vina del Mar. The left-hander had been out with a knee problem since losing to Lucas Rosol at Wimbledon in June. Nadal's planned return at the end of the year was delayed due to illness. We'll see how he comes back to the singles on the clay later on.
It's not the first game I've played, even though I've been out for a while. The feeling's very different. It's simply some doubt from the beginning about how I'm going to respond onto playing tennis, about my physical level, about my knee and everything else, but really, I feel comfortable playing tennis. Doctors say my knee is okay. There's no risk of it breaking and the injury is healed.
The Eastern Conference leading Miami Heat played host to the Charlotte Bobcats. The Heat had won 8 of their last 9 at home, while the Bobcats had fallen in 6 of their last 7. The hosts took the lead early on and Dwayne Wade led the charge. He drove in for the layup, grabbed the rebound and made it on the second attempt. Wade finished with 20 points and 12 rebounds for the Heat. James then took the helm with Charlotte's post players providing little protection for their basket. James dominated in the lane throughout the game. James nailed 5 out of 5 in the first quarter and the Heat led by 22 to 21. In the second quarter, with 3 minutes to go, James with the defensive rebound. The 28-year-old cuts through the Bobcats defence for the layup. Beautiful coast-to-coast play. Miami finished the first half leading 47-43. The struggling Bobcats fought hard in the second half, but they could not keep James out of the paint as Miami's leader never attempted a shot outside of 15 feet. James was at his mercurial best and scored 31 for the night, 13 of 14 field goal attempts. James added 8 assists and 8 rebounds to boot. The red-hot display finally allowed the Heat to prevail 99-94. They've now won 9 out of their last 10 at home. What a player. We're going to look at the other matches on Monday as well. You'll see the scores coming up very shortly. And the Indiana Pacers is where we'll start. They beat Chicago 111-101 and claimed a share of the Central Division lead with that victory. The Wizards upset the Clippers 98-90. The Clippers played without the injured duo of Blake Griffin and Chris Paul. You can see the Knicks there. They cruised past the Pistons 99-85. And Oklahoma City Thunder, they downed the Mavericks 112-91. The flame of the 2013 Special Olympics Winter Games has been extinguished following the final day of competition in Pyeongchang, South Korea. Some of the last medals at stake were in the alpine skiing slalom finals, in which over 300 skiers from 49 countries have been in action. The competition is split into 3 different categories: novice, intermediate and advanced. Roser Segué from Spain won the gold medal in slalom's F07 intermediate level. Canada's Christina Ettimer took silver with a 2-round final score of 1 minute 40.24 seconds. In the slalom intermediate level, F08 division, 36-year-old Jane Frances Andrews from Great Britain triumphed. It was the 2nd gold medal for her at this year's event. In the slalom intermediate level F10, American alpine skier Mona Sibeski won the gold in a time of 2 minutes 44.21 seconds. And that about wraps up the sport for now. We're back with Sports Scene just a little bit later on.
Well, thanks so much, David, for that. All right, now let's turn to the South Pacific. An 8.0 magnitude earthquake in the water has generated a tsunami, prompting warnings to several island nations. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center said that a tsunami of 9 meters was measured in Lata Wharf in the Solomon Islands. No damage was immediately reported, but the center cautioned the waves could be destructive near the epicenter and threaten more distant coasts. The tsunami warning is in effect for the Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, Nauru, Papua New Guinea, Tuvalu, New Caledonian, and Coast Ray, Fiji, Kiribati, Wallis, and Futuna. And a tsunami watch is in effect for American Samoa, Australia, New Zealand, and eastern Indonesia. The United States Geological Survey estimates that the quake could lead to millions of US dollars in economic loss. In 2007, an 8.1 magnitude quake struck the Solomon Islands, causing a tsunami that left at least 52 people dead and thousands homeless. Now for our special series on climate change, Melting Point. Today we go to Greenland, which many consider ground zero for climate change. A stable bridge washes away in a matter of days, while ice, as far as the eye can see, slowly disappears. Scientists around the world are stunned as they watch what's happening there. And Sean Calebs takes us onto the Greenland ice sheet.
It was a day few in the Greenland town of Kangerlussuaq will soon forget.
It became like the thing to do in town, to go down and watch the massive amount of water going through.
Researcher Åsa Rennermom watched the one bridge in town engulfed by the swollen Watson River, a sight no one in the small coastal town ever expected to see.
Never. I mean, I talked to people who lived in the town for 30 years. They'd never seen anything like that.
It was triggered by a record melt-off from Greenland's massive ice sheet. In a few short summer days, 97% of the ice shelf experienced some melting.
We have 56,000 people here in Greenland.
Travel guide and native Greenlander Adam Leibert has had a front row seat as climate change alters the Greenland landscape. He takes vacationers to see Russell Glacier, a 25-kilometer drive from Kangerlussuaq. Leibert says a new breed of tourist is coming to Greenland, parents who bring their children to show them the impressive glaciers before it's too late.
We we show them about how fast the ice melting and how fast they're retiring somewhere and how much water.
There's no question maritime glaciers are getting smaller and smaller. Liebert took video after video of Russell Glacier calving. He's been a guide here 19 years and believes this year the glacier lost 30% of its mass.
The margins of the Greenland ice sheets are losing the most mass than any other place on the globe.
Scott Lufke is a NASA scientist. He pores over data that comes in from a pair of satellites called GRACE, the Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment. This is what the meltdown looks like to him, and GRACE is delivering very sobering news. Greenland is losing about 230 gigatons of water every year, on average, for the past 10 years. What does that mean in layman's terms?
About 80 gigatons is the amount of water in the Chesapeake Bay. So nearly 3 times the amount of water in the Chesapeake Bay is being lost to the oceans every year on average over that time period.
3 times the amount of water in the Chesapeake Bay in an average year. In 2012, NASA says Greenland shed 5 times the amount of water in the bay.
This year, the melting that occurred over the entire Greenland was highest than ever recorded before.
The melting here will affect the entire globe. 40% or so of all sea level rise can be traced back to the melting in Greenland. For 5 years, researcher Marco Tedesco from the City College of New York has spent summers on Greenland's ice sheet. He says the Arctic is experiencing a crisis.
The snow can hold us for a while, but then the lake is already, oops! There's a very strong argument that's been made recently by many scientists about the fact that extreme weather can be one of the consequences of the climatic change.
2 words, and give me what comes into your mind first. Global warming.
Global warming, I can answer without 2 words. Man-made.
He says man has pumped more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere in the past 100 years than the previous 20,000. And in simple terms, Tedesco believes we have the ability and the know-how to take on climate change.
It is something that we are responsible for, yes, we as humans. Is it something that we can do something about it? Yes. Is it something that we should do something, and are we doing? I'm not convinced.
Well, the world of ice is obviously in danger, and with that, we come to the end of this edition of NewsHour on CCTV News. From the whole team here, thanks for being with us. Until next time, goodbye.
We're not giving up.
So far, Egypt's relation with Iran is kept at the same low level as when Mubarak was president. But since Morsi came to power, Egypt has been giving mixed signals to the world regarding Iran. After a complete blackout, it is now leaving a narrow window of opportunity to improve relations.
I believe the new Egyptian leadership is using Iran as a kind of a bargaining chip at this moment in its relation with the United States, in its relation with Israel, in its relations with the Gulf countries. So keep Iran as a kind of a card that you could use if you are forced to do that, and keep it as a kind of a way to pressure those kind of hard allies.
Ahmadinejad's visit comes under the umbrella of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation Summit, which Egypt is hosting. He also expressed his desire to visit Tahrir Square, the core of change in Egypt that might be the reason to restore relations between both countries. This is the second opportunity in 6 months that both Ahmadinejad and Morsi meet. But while it seems that potential exists to restore relations, Egypt is still hesitant. It fears that such step might freeze billions of dollars of aid promised from the West. So currently, it is satisfied to turn Iran from a liability to an asset. Adel Mahroui, CCTV, Cairo.
Ado Al-Mahrouri now joins us from Cairo for the latest on the visit by Iranian President Ahmadinejad. Well, Ado, we understand that President Ahmadinejad has met with Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi, and he's also been received by the prominent Muslim cleric Ahmad Al-Tayyab. So tell us. Iranian President Ahmadinejad meets with Egypt's most prominent Muslim cleric on his three-day visit to the country. Opening amid controversy, Japan establishes a new office to handle the country's territorial disputes with its neighbors. Want not, waste not. China launches a national campaign to cut government extravagance and public food waste. And continuing with our special series on climate change, now a world of fires. Could Greenland one day be a world underwater? Hello, welcome from Beijing. You are watching NewsHour on CCTV News. I'm Wang Mengmang. We begin in Egypt. Iranian President Mohamed Ahmadinejad has been received by Egypt's most prominent Muslim cleric, Ahmad Al-Tayyab. The meeting took place in Cairo at Al-Azhar, the Sunni Muslim world's foremost Islamist institution. Ahmadinejad is on a three-day visit to the country. It's the first trip by an Iranian leader to Egypt since the late 1970s. Al-Tayyab said Egypt would stand with Iran, but warned the Iranian leader against interference in the region or the spread of Shiite influence. The cleric particularly warned mainly Shiite Iran against interference in Bahrain. Ahmadinejad told journalists that Iran is very close in opinions and point of views with Al-Azhar when it comes to regional interests. Ahmadinejad's visit is the latest sign of efforts by Egypt's Islamist President Mohamed Morsi to improve relations. For more on the significance of Ahmadinejad's visit, our correspondent in Cairo, Ado Al-Mahrouri, has this report.
His trip is seen as a potential to restore relations between both countries. The world is watching closely President Ahmadinejad's visit to Cairo.
Iran is very keen to develop relations with Egypt, particularly after the revolution, with the rise of the Muslim Brothers to power, etc. So they entertained the idea of developing relations with Egypt, even developing this relation to the level of some sort of like a strong working relationship, maybe some sort of alliance. They realize that there is a lot of difficulties facing this goal. However,